Shalom Aleichem and welcome everyone. Baruch Hashem. We are now this week holding in Parshat Behar. Parshat Behar, as we know, here in Chutz La'aretz, we're in Behar in the Eretz Yisrael, Parshat Behar. And Baruch Hashem, we've come to the second half of Sfirat HaOmer. Right, up until now, most of us have the minhag of quasi avelut. So Baruch Hashem, we've had Lag BaOmer. I'm sure everybody celebrated accordingly. So let us prepare for this parasha, Parashat Behar. In this week's parasha, we find there's about 24 mitzvot in this parasha, and one of the mitzvot that we have, if you take a look in Pasuk Yud Zayin, Perek Chafei, it says as follows: Velo tonu ish et amito, ve'yareta me'elohecha, ki ani Adonai Elohechem. You shall not aggrieve your fellow man. You should fear Hashem, because I am Hashem. That's what it says in Pasuk. The Gemara in Baba Metzia tells us this Pasuk of Velo tanu ish et amito, you should not aggrieve your fellow man. Do not make them upset. Do not cause them pain. It's do not cause them pain through words. Do not cause them what's called ona'at divarim. There are different types of ona'at, other pains that you can cause. This one of them that they give an example of words. For example, a person should not ask a merchant about the price of an item on sale if he has no intention of making a purchase. You walk into a store, I've seen it happen, people come in, they don't know what to do, what to waste their time with, so they start bothering the store owner. How much is this? How much is that? And meanwhile, they have no intention to buy that. That's a complete isur. It's onat divarim. You're causing pain to the guy. He thinks you're going to buy it from him, or maybe he has a chance at the sale and you're not planning to buy anything at all. You're not allowed to tell about tshuva. You remember how you used to make all these averot? You're not allowed to tell gerim. Remember how you used to be like goyim and you did this and like that? Sefer HaChinuch says it is forbidden to oppress a Jew with words. This means that one may not speak any words to a Jew that will cause him pain. He includes in this verbal abuse of children. The Gemara, the next daf in Bava Metzia, tells us that a person should be especially worried of has v'shalom, verbally abusing his wife, as her tears come easily, as a woman's tears come easily, and punishment for wronging her will not be long in coming. We have today many people who are considered gentlemen in their relationship with strangers, yet their manner and speech and conduct with their immediate family leave much to be desired. The Torah requires us to deal pleasantly with everyone, Jews, non-Jews alike, but there's a basic rule that all matters of chesed, the closer the relative, the higher the priority. It's hard to understand why people sometimes are much nicer and politer to outside people, but when it comes to their own family, not so much. In the Geisha world, in the secular world, violence means shooting and stabbing. But to a Jew, words, a person can commit violence with his tongue. As Mishlei tells us that one who speaks harshly, like the piercings of a sword. The Havetz Chaim would tell over of a story that took place in his yeshiva, in the yeshiva in Radin. There was a elderly Maggid, Rabbi Yankel. Rabbi Yankel, in his younger years, he used to go around from town to town and give over dirashot. He wasn't the best of the Magidim, of the preachers, of the story, of the tellers, of the speech givers. But he memorized some good ones and he would share it. People felt bad for him and they would give a few coins. And that's the way he made his money. He got older. He couldn't travel anymore from city to city. So he went to live with his son in the city of Radin. And he would spend most of his day in the yeshiva warming himself by the fire. Whenever the yeshiva baruchim would come by, he would give over his derashot. So some yeshiva baruchim would listen. They would say thank you. And they move on. But some of the yeshiva baruchim wanted to have a little bit of excitement with him. So they started to tell him, but your drasha, there's questions on it from here. It doesn't make sense over here. It doesn't make sense like that. And they started poking holes in the logic of his speeches. And they would tease him. They would tease him by saying, Rabbi Yankel, your whole drashot doesn't make any sense. And he would get upset. And he would chase after them. And it made for some good fun. When the Hafetz Chaim heard about the mistreatment of this Rabbi Yankel Magid, he called together all his students and he told the students of yeshiva, he said to them, how can you do this to him? He has lived an exhausting, poverty-stricken life, filled with much humiliation and suffering. Now all that he has left is trying to have some nachas, trying to relive some of the glory days. And you want to deprive him of even this? There can be no greater cruelty than that. Rav Pam would say that this incident, this story teaches a very important lesson. Aside from the onat devarim, that a person should be very careful how he talks, he says that especially when it comes to older people, the health, the memory begin to fail them. And the positions of influence are replaced by younger people. Tending to their own bodily needs becomes a big ordeal. They feel helpless, dependent on the insistence of others. They live alone, and the circle of friends dwindle. They have the feeling that they have one foot in the grave. It's difficult for a young person to understand what he's going to, but they fail to realize, even if a person doesn't talk bad to them, they fail to realize how words can make a difference to them. There's an old expression, an English expression, words can work wonders, and words can work horrors. Rapam says, a person sees an older person, you tell them a good morning. If they're talking to you, listen to them. Baruch Hashem, in my career as a nurse, I've had the opportunity to listen to elderly people, Jews, non-Jews alike, just about their life, about how they lived, how they did. You give them a sense of encouragement. You feel like they feel like they have some importance. This is how a person has to take a look and have to be. As Shlomo HaMelech writes in Mishlei, the tongue of the Chacham, the tongue of the wise, heals people. That is what we have to try to do. I saw a story in the Peninim. He brings down a story about causing someone pain. B'kitzur, there was a family, a hatan was getting married, he had his kala, and they were having the engagement party at the kala's house, and the uncle of the hatan, he comes to participate in the simcha, and he starts talking to the other family, and he realizes that the kala's father and him were actually in the same yeshiva at the same time. And they started talking and getting to know different things. If I remember, reminiscing the good old days in the yeshiva. And then the uncle of the hatan says to the kala's father, says, I remember one time in the yeshiva, you got locked up in a room, a couple of guys locked you up. And how did you feel about that? You remember that one? And he says, that, you should know, that gave me so much torment, so much trouble, so much problems. It traumatized me for life that I've never forgiven the person who did that to me. The uncle of the hatan, hearing this, he couldn't believe it. He was played a prank. It was him who started the whole thing. But he just played a prank, and here he is some 20-something years later, and the guy he played the prank on is still upset at him. So he went to a Rav, a distinguished posek, and he asked him what to do. Should I ask the Kala's father for forgiveness? And the Rav said, I think the best thing to do is to go and ask the Kala's father for forgiveness. So the uncle listened to the Rav, and he went and he asked the Kala's father. He says, it was me who locked you up in the room when we were in yeshiva, and I want to ask you forgiveness for that. And the Kala's father was not very easy to give forgiveness, but after a few times asking, he was mochel him. The postscript of the story is that 1 year exactly following the incident when the father of the Kala was mochel this man for locking him up in the dormitory and causing so much pain to him, 1 year exactly later, he comes back to this Kala's father and says to him, you should know my wife just gave birth to our first child after being married for 26 years.
26 years old.
Causing someone pain is not a simple factor. It can have much ramifications on a person's life. Like where Pam says in the Goyish world, pain is considered causing someone physical pain. You stab them, you knife them, you shoot them, that's pain. But in the Jewish world, that's not what pain, that's pain. But pain is also considered, when you aggrieve someone, you cause someone pain through words, through actions, you're not hurting them. But that in itself is considered terrible pain to cause someone else. Let's move on. In this week's parasha, we have a pasuk, a famous pasuk, that deals with tzedaka, and helping out somebody else. If your brother becomes poor, and right, he becomes poor, and you have to, what do you have to do with him? The pasuk says, and you have to strengthen him. A ger is someone who's megayer, someone who lives there, and he should live with you. It becomes our issue. David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Ashrei maskil eldal, which means praiseworthy is the person. What's maskil mean? To think of, the poor person. David HaMelech doesn't say Ashrei mi shenattain tzedaka ledal.
Eldal is Aleph Lamed or Ayin Lamed?
Eldal.
Aleph?
As in two. Yes. To the dal. Ashrei maskil eldal. So what happens here?
Kel or El?
It would be as two, towards.
I always thought it's God as El. Like Kel. That's what I always thought that.
Okay, so the way in the Paninim he's learning that Ashrei maskil eldal is praiseworthy. You want to take the English translation of it? Yeah, we have where do we have the the Tanakh?
What part?
41. I'm Perry 41 too. The Midrash Tanchuma, he says the meaning of maskil here means to think, to contemplate. Rabbeinu Yonah says the pasuk does not say to give tzedakah, but rather the pasuk says to be maskil, which means to think about the poor person.
Yeah, you're right.
Our Chachamim tell us, it means two, towards. Our Chachamim tells, what does this mean? That giving tzedakah is not enough. It's not enough to give money. It's not enough to help the person by giving money. That's not the point of tzedakah. Because David HaMelech says is Ashrei maskil eldal, the person who thinks about the poor. Which means when you give, you have to think about what you're doing and you have to feel their pain. The man standing at the door is you. As the pasuk says, Im kesef taved ami et ha'ani imach, the person, the ani who's with you. You have to feel that. Right? There's a famous famous mashal from the Ben Ish Chai. I'm sure you heard it many times. There was a king. He had a son. His son was going to become the next king, so he hired a tutor to teach the son, teach him everything in the world. And this tutor was, best professor, taught him everything: astronomy, economy, whatever it was. He knew science. Everything was taught. At the end of his years of teaching this boy, the king came to test him to see what he knows. He was very impressed. He told this tutor, "You can go into the storehouse. You can take any treasure you want." And the tutor said, "Listen, I have one more thing to teach your son. I just need him to come back to my house with me. I have one last lesson to teach him." Okay, why not? The son goes with him. The prince goes with the tutor. Comes back to his house. The minute he comes into the house, the tutor jumps on the prince, ties him up to a chair, takes out a baseball bat, and starts whacking him all over his body. Takes out a belt and starts to smack him, takes out different instruments and starting to hit him left and right. He bloodied him all up. Then he unties him, and the prince runs out, goes into the chariot and runs back to the palace. He runs back to the palace on the chariot. He comes inside, he's all bloodied. Everyone's looking at him. What happened? The king says, "What happened?" He says his tie. He says, "Father, the tutor beat me up." "Tutor beat you up? What? I was just about to offer him the treasures in the world, and now..." So he gets the tutor, he brings him to the palace, and he said, "Listen, I should just kill you right now, right this second. But I'm going to let you speak for 1 second. Tell me why. Why should I kill you? Why you beat up my son? Why I shouldn't kill you?" And the tutor says, "Listen, you told me to teach your son everything, right? The first thing you have to know as a king, he's going to have to give punishment to people. And he's going to say, give 25 lashes, give 50 lashes, beat him up. He's not going to know what it feels like because he never got beaten up. So I beat him up so he now knows what it feels like." Listen to Ben Ish Chai's nimshot. Ben Ish Chai says, that's why we have Yom Kippur, the Ben Ish Chai says. Why? So you should feel what it is to be hungry when someone else comes to ask you for money. The Ben Ish Chai says, the reason you have Yom Kippur is you should feel hungry, so you should know how someone else feels when they come asking tzedakah for food. This is what it means to be maskil eldal, to feel the person's trouble, the person's pain, the poor person, how they feel, to contemplate how they feel. You have to actually think about it. When someone comes over to you and says, "I'm collecting money, I have 9 kids and I have to make chasana for my daughter," you have to actually stop for a minute and think, what would it mean for me to feel like that? And then you give. If you just gave money, you're right to giving the money, but you weren't yet to the whole mitzvah of how to give tzedakah to a poor person. But let's go another step further. A poor person, someone who's hungry, someone who doesn't have money, besides not having the money, besides not having what they need in life, they have a lot of baggage that comes with them. A lot of emotional baggage that comes with them. How do we remove some of that feeling? How do we remove some of that feeling from that poor person? We have to view, like I say, you have to feel for him, but you have to view from his perspective. Meaning, we must give in a manner that the poor person actually feels that he is doing us a favor. We have to tell him, "Thank you for coming here, so I can give you money." One who gives in such a manner understands that he's not actually giving, but he's taking. He's not the beneficiary to the poor person. If anything, the poor person is enabling him to achieve merit. Everyone knows a famous story with Rav Chaim Shmuel Levin's wife. The Rebbetzin, she was involved in a Tzedaka organization in Eretz Yisrael. And they would give out Yom Tov packages for poor people who needed certain, stuff to help them for the Yom Tov. And there was one poor person, Koilo, and they delivered him a package. And up until then, his family had very little to eat, and he was so excited. He finally got a package of food, and there was chicken, and there was vegetables, and other stuff like that. And about a half hour before Yom Tov, he gets a knock on the door. An old lady is standing there begging for some food for Yom Tov. She says, "Please, I need some chicken. Can you please give me some chicken?" Right? And everybody knows the story. The man is debating, should I give? He says, I can't. I have my kids. My family have been waiting. But what can I do? She needs. Finally, after going back and forth in his head for 5 minutes, he goes to the refrigerator to open the door and cut a piece of chicken and bring it to him. What does he find? He finds his son, his 2-year-old son, on a shelf in the refrigerator, all blue in the face. He called Hatzalah. Hatzalah says, literally, if he was there for 5 more minutes, the boy would have died. So she comes, and it says Rebbetzin Shmulevitz, she's part of the Tzedaka organization. She's the one who gave the food to that little guy. And so she hears the story. She comes to Reb Chaim Shmulevitz. And she says to Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, says to her husband, explain to me. I know Tzedaka Tzel Memavitz, that Tzedaka saves from death, but explain to me what happened here. And Reb Chaim Shmulevitz explained something that we've said here many times. He says the Kollel fellow was granted a final test to determine if he was worthy of being his son's father. A final test is a last opportunity granted to a person to save himself. If he passes the test, he gets zechut, and he will get saved. But if Chas Shalom, he fails, he doesn't do that chesed, then he will not get saved. So Rav Pam says, basically the same way Rav Chaim Shlomo said, he says that every time chesed opportunity comes your way to do something for somebody, if someone, not telling you, saying something comes to you that you have to do, if you don't do it, then you have not done a chesed to yourself. That's what we're trying to say. And that's how you have to feel every time you do chesed to a poor person. Is that you're not actually giving him, but he's giving you an opportunity now to save yourself. Another famous story with Rav Meir Abuchatzera. Rav Meir Abuchatzera was traveling with his assistant. They were going in the car in Eretz Yisrael. They were traveling. And a Coca-Cola truck passes them. And Rav Meir Abuchatzera tells the assistant, the gabbai, you have to stop that truck. So the gabbai listens. The Meir says to stop the truck. You stop the truck. So, right. So he makes him stop the truck. He drives in front of him. And now he says, go to him and ask him for a Coca-Cola bottle. So he goes over to the truck driver. The truck driver is already screaming, why are you stopping me? He says, listen, the rabbi is asking if you can give him a Coca-Cola bottle. Coca-Cola bottle? Well, you think this is a store here? This is not retail. I do shipments. I can't. He says, please, the rabbi is asking. He wants it. Please, can you just give him? We'll pay for it. We'll pay it 50 times the price. We'll give you 50 shekels, whatever it is. And he says, no, I'm not giving it. Nothing. And he gets back in his truck. And he gets out of there. 5 minutes later, they hear a huge crash. And when the driver finally gets to that scene, they see the truck driver got into an accident. He hit something, and he got killed right there in that accident. So the gabbai says to Rav Meir Abuchatzera, he says, what happened? He said, I saw the Malach HaMavet dancing on top of this truck. I saw that this guy was about to be killed. So I gave him the opportunity, one final test, for him to save himself. All he had to do was to do a chesed, give somebody something that they wanted. And he didn't. And therefore he met his demise. How scary it is. Just think about it. That means that every time you have a chesed opportunity, it might not be this drastic, the life and death, but it's really you yourself are gaining from it. And therefore, you have to make that poor person feel as if, whoever it is that's asking for that chesed, as if he's doing you the biggest mitzvah ever. That he's giving you the opportunity. And you thank them for it. This is what it means to be Ashrei Maskil Eldal. Person who contemplates. Because you're not just giving stuff, you have to think about what you're doing. The Kava Yosher, and the Kava Yosher shares another interesting story. That there was a distinguished, religious, righteous Jew who had the opportunity of hosting the Arizal in his house. He did everything for the Arizal. He gave him everything that he needed. And prior to leaving, the Ari said to him, what can I do for you? How can I repay you for your outstanding hospitality? So this man, he said, listen, when we were first married, my wife and I were blessed with children. And then suddenly, she became infertile. She's not able to have any more children. And we have not had a child in a number of years. Can you please daven for us to have children? Listen what the Arizal said to him. The Ari HaKadosh said the following. He said to him, at one time, there was a ladder that was at the side of your house, which the chickens conveniently use as a means for reaching the water bucket that was on the shelf near the top of the ladder. One day, your wife instructed the maid to remove the ladder. Certainly, her intention was not to cause any pain for the chickens, but the chickens had pain. Their access to the water was cut off. Ever since that day, as a result of the moved ladder, they have been miserable. Hashem Yitbarach has compassion for all his creations, and therefore the pain of these chickens did not go unanswered. And that's why you don't have any children anymore. Amazing. The story continues. The Kal Yasher says, as soon as the host heard this, he returned the ladder. And shortly thereafter, his wife became pregnant and she had children again. It says over here in the Peninim al Torah, how careful we must be with the feelings of every creature. And so how much more we have to be careful of the feelings of the person who's coming and asking us for a chesed. A chesed that's really an opportunity. Maybe we zocher to have this mindset when we do it. Because it's easy to talk about it, to speak about it, say a story about it. But when it comes to the action, comes to the tachas, you really got to do it. Someone's asking you, it gets hard. Right? It's out of my way. You know, I had once someone tell me, I do chesed when it's on my way. You know, it's when, that's not really chesed. That's you just doing what you're doing and you happen to take something else. Chesed means to really think about somebody else. To really do something for somebody else. So something that might not be as easy for you. Now, you don't have to do something that's beyond you. You know, someone's asking you to buy him an airline ticket to Eretz Yisrael because he wants to get there. I don't know if that applies, you know, as chesed. But if someone asking you to help him out, and I'm talking especially about those opportunities, just come and you're there. Never let those opportunities go, because those opportunities that are coming to you specifically, you should never ever let them go. So, Rabbi, just to review a few lessons that we learned was how careful we have to be that we don't cause pain to someone. And pain doesn't mean physical pain; it means pain, any pain, talking, mentioning something to somebody that you know will cause them pain. Even to children, and especially to family members, it's completely asur. And if a person does that, it can have terrible effect to him. And the second lesson was to be someone who contemplates about what it means to be poor, what it means to feel, to be in pain. And may HaKadosh Baruch Hu give us a zechut to take these lessons to heart, apply them. We should never see any pain. We should only hear good stuff. And may we be, Be'ezat Hashem, zochet to the Geula Shalema, b'mheir b'yameinu, Amen. Amen. Amen.